Support for Audacious with Chion Wolf provided by a generous contribution from Suzanne Hopgood in memory of Frank Lord.
From the top of my stairs in Hartford, Connecticut, this is Audacious. I'm Chion Wolf. A few years ago, I was going through an extremely hard time. My wife just left me for the next door neighbor with whom she was having an affair months after we got married during a pandemic. So you can imagine I was not well, especially in the mornings. And I remember there was this one morning, I'm standing at the top of these stairs where I am right now, and I had this sudden memory of Christmas morning in my childhood home. I am sitting at the top of the stairs with my three big brothers, delirious with excitement, and my parents very freaking slowly mosey downstairs to see if Santa came and to turn on the Christmas lights and start the coffee. And my brothers and I, frozen at the top of the stairs, wait and we listen. Suddenly, finally, we hear the phrase we are living for, "Nope, no presents!" And we go screaming down the stairs, yay! Now, back at the top of my stairs, feeling freaking miserable, this memory becomes a new ritual. So every morning, for the past nearly 4 years, I've done this. Yay! Yay! Today we're talking about the rituals we create for ourselves and the ones we share with others. For the past 2 years, at the end of every interview, I've asked Audacious guests to tell me about their rituals. You'll hear the clips we gathered throughout the show. But first, let's get a grip on what rituals are and what they're for with the author of The Power of Ritual, Turning Everyday Activities into Soulful Practices, Casper to Kyle. He's got master's degrees in divinity and public policy from Harvard University, and he's the co-founder of Sacred Design Lab. That's a nonprofit group of designers, theologians, and strategists who explore and interpret the changing landscape of community and spiritual life. So, how does Casper define what we're talking about here?
So for me, a ritual is something that makes the invisible visible. The things that are valuable to us, that are invisible, like love or gratitude or hope, we find ways to make them visible through ritual. So maybe there's a song, maybe there's incense, maybe there's food, maybe there's dance. There's all sorts of ways that are, using the five senses that we put together to communicate this feeling we feel or this hope that we have or this gratitude that we're experiencing. So that's how I think about ritual. It's making the invisible visible in some way.
And it also, in my experience, seems like something that's done repeatedly. Yeah?
Yeah, so I think about this a lot because so many of us have habits. And I think sometimes we get in a bit of a word soup. We say things like ritual and habit and practice, and they're all kind of the same thing. But for me, what sets a ritual apart from a habit is that it's meaningful, right? You might brush your teeth every day, and that's good. Keep up your oral hygiene.
By all means.
Yeah, exactly. But what makes ritual different is that there's an intentionality to it. So I think about three things when I'm thinking about moving from a habit to a ritual. And the first is that intention. The second is paying attention while you're doing the ritual. And the third is, like you just said, repetition, coming back to it time and time again. Now, sometimes a ritual might be something you do every day, but it might be every week. If you think about the Shabbat practice for Jews who celebrate that on Friday night, it might even be something that you do once in a lifetime. Maybe getting married is something you do once. Hey, some people do it more than once, but the repetition there is kind of generational rather than daily or weekly or monthly. So even if it isn't happening super regularly, that sense of repetition adds that layer of meaning over time.
So ritual can be really important for community building. Ritual can also be really important for a single person. On this episode, you're going to hear from a lot of people who talk about personal rituals, things they do by themselves for themselves. I think that sometimes when you have a personal ritual, it's to make yourself feel safe, feel connected. I'd love to hear your thoughts on personal rituals.
Well, one of the things that's beautiful about a ritual that you practice by yourself is that it gives you a sense of rhythm. I think so much of our lives now, because of electricity, because of the internet, and thank goodness for those things, but it does mean that there is no natural cycle to the day. There isn't a sense of like, oh, it's light outside, so we got to go milk the cows or whatever it is. It's like, I could stay up editing this piece of video until like 4 a.m, right? And so one of the benefits of having ritual is that it gives some structure to time. It gives us a rhythm to get into. And I think one of my favorite poets, an Irish man called John O'Donoghue, who famously said the second best thing he ever did was to become a priest, and the best thing he ever did was to leave the priesthood, which I just think is such a beautiful, beautiful thing. But he said that a life of rhythm is a holy life. And so when we are living in that sense of a rhythm, we're in touch with our souls, if you will. There's just an ease of living when we live in rhythm.
So what is a personal ritual that you have that you'd like to share?
Well, I go big on the once a year rituals. And my husband is a former professional musician. And so when we met, he was singing professionally. He was a classical musician. And so he would get a bunch of his friends who were all essentially opera singers together at Christmas time to sing Christmas carols in black tie. And we live in a 1-bedroom apartment. We do not have a lot of space. But I tell you, we had 68 people in like ball gowns, black tie. He baked for like 5 days beforehand. We've done this for 13 years now. And we sing these incredible Christmas carols in 4-part harmony, multiple languages. And we have real candles on the Christmas tree. Like, I really go all out for this particular one. And what I love so much is that people who come for the first time are kind of just like bowled over by the experience. They're like, I didn't know this was possible. And you can't do that every week, right? But once a year, you can go all out for something big like that. So I love those kind of rituals that give me a sense of the rhythm of time through the year. But I have little ones too. You know, I think sometimes we hear a word like ritual and we think, oh, it has to be something really intense and complicated. And even something just like snuggling my husband when I go to bed and saying, I love you. You know, it can just be a short little moment of connection like that I make sure to do every day. It just connects us. And that for me is what ritual's there to do, is to help us connect to each other and the world around us.
When I picture people going to your party and being totally bowled over by everything about it, I also picture them leaving that party and going home and thinking, maybe is there something I can do in my life that's not maybe exactly what they did, but it felt so cool. And maybe there's something I can do. And so like I have a morning ritual where every morning, no matter how I feel, I run downstairs as if it's Christmas morning, yelling,
oh
yay! Every morning for years now.
I love this.
And my friend Michelle house sat for me recently. And I'd sent her a video of the morning ritual because she was taking care of my dog and my cat. And I just wanted her to know like these little details about how the day goes. And she, when I was away, sent me videos every morning of her doing my ritual, running downstairs going, yay! So have you heard or what can you say about how rituals can be passed along or even inspiring for other people to create their own?
One of the things about rituals, first of all, is that they make life more enjoyable, right? Like a delicious food at a certain time of year, or, you know, running down the stairs screaming Yahoo, right? Like as if it's Christmas morning. It brings joy. But the other part about ritual that I think we often don't talk about is that it's not just decorative, but it's formative. By practicing these rituals over and over again, we're shaping ourselves in a certain direction. And you didn't say this, but what I'm reading into the ritual that you have every morning is that you want to start the day with a sense of joy and possibility and openness and gratitude, right? Even when you don't feel that way, you're going to practice that ritual to help you get to that place.
Especially when I don't feel that way.
Especially then. Right. And so one of the things that happens, you know, maybe after attending the Christmas Carol sing-along extravaganza or house sitting for you and getting to participate in that, is that we're reminded of how we want to be in the world. And so the ritual may look different to you than it does for me, but there is a sense of like, what's the world that our hearts know is possible? What kind of person do we want to show up as today? How do we want to love each other? And I think so much of the rest of our economic and social experience shapes us in a different direction, right? You got to win, you got to be the best, the strongest, the richest, the most powerful. And these rituals often subvert that and invite us to be the most compassionate, the most generous, the most gentle. And that's for me why rituals are so powerful, because they have the potential to shape who we show up as in the world.
The people whose voices we're going to hear today fall into some general categories. And so I'd like to start with one, which are morning rituals. What can you say about morning rituals? What did you learn about them?
look, I think any time when we're transitioning from one state of being into another, rituals are a really useful tool. And so that might be from sleeping into waking. It might be from waking into sleeping. It might be from, hey, I've been at work, now I'm going to pick up the kids. It might be the moment when I'm leaving the house to go somewhere else. So transitions is how I would think about it. That's really the powerful moment for ritual, because it helps us set that intention for how do I want to be in this next chapter of the day, or how do I want to be in this relationship with this person who I'm about to see. So I think the morning is a great moment of transition. And so if that's a good moment, just to sit quietly. People meditate in the morning, or they might pray, or they might run down the stairs shouting hooray. But those are powerful moments of transition. And I think that's why mornings are such a good place for ritual.
All right, let's hear from a few audacious guests who shared their morning rituals.
Before I touch my phone, before I turn the TV on, I will sit up and give thanks to some greater power than me, whether you call it God, Allah, Buddha, the universe. It's being thankful that made it through yesterday and have another chance to be great today. Then in prayer, there's you're having a conversation with God. In meditation, you're being still in the moment. So I like to wake up in the morning and find my stillness before taking control of the day or letting the day take control of me.
Oh boy, I'm a morning pages girly. At the beginning of the pandemic, all these tech people were like, I'm doing the artist way. And I'm like, what the heck is the artist way? It's like a 12-week creative recovery program that's self-led, that you're meant to get back in touch with your inner artist. And one of the practices is a daily morning pages where you get up in the morning, you dump out 3 pages, longhand written, of whatever's in your brain, stream of consciousness. You don't read it back to yourself. You don't let anybody else read it. You're literally just getting into flow. And the way that has organized my life and made things clearer for me, if day after day I get up and say the same, I'm like, oh, that's something that needs to change. The way that stopped so much of my fear procrastination around things, because I just got tired of hearing myself repeat things that were nagging at me subconsciously. It drums up lots of stuff. I'm like, whoa. Sometimes it comes out and hits you in the face on like the last page. You dig out a treasure.
I have been getting up early at 6 a.m., making breakfast. And the very first thing that I do is I journal, and I do it by a theme. So this month is August and my word is liberated. So every day I'm writing something about liberation, and I'm asking God, all right, God, liberate me from my thinking. Today's liberation was, okay, God, show me that you want me to be a bigger speaker. You want me to have a bigger presence. What do I want to see evidence of in the day? And now I'm going to actively seek that out. Doesn't mean I'm going to pretend, but if it comes my way, I'm going to be like, ooh, I talked about that this morning. And it's my ritual, right? Because I'm asking God before I talk to anyone else and have any other distraction, here's what I'm needing to be liberated from, because the small version of me would stay small forever. So I need you to affirm that you want me to remove this small thinking, right? Or you want me to feel differently. And so I'm a firm believer of choosing 3 words for the year and rotating each one of those words every month, focusing on that word, and then asking God specifically, show me this word today. And then I look for it.
I always do everything in the shower in the exact same order. So I always, wash my hair first and my face and my body. So it's like going from head to toe. And I think just having that one ritual every day, every time, I'm cleansing myself, doing it with that intention of starting at the top and working my way down, it's really grounding.
The making of the morning coffee. It is just a few minutes long, but I am silent before and throughout. It's very meditative to me. And I'm not a fancy pour over. No, it's like literally a percolator. That process of just me and whatever messes up in there, quieting and waiting to receive that beautiful sensory wave of the smell of the coffee, that is really important to my day and has been a constant throughout my adult life.
That was Palestinian poet Lena Tuffaha. You also heard from Anna Holland, Kristen Gies, Jessica Jin, and Dean Edwards. Nature rituals are a big part of how we develop our sense of closeness with the planet. Casper to Kyle met up with the founders of the British Pilgrimage Trust, Will Parsons and Guy Hayward. They help people rediscover the UK and themselves by walking ancient pilgrimage routes. So what did Casper learn from them about nature and rituals?
One of the delights of rituals in nature is that it helps us remember that we're not isolated individuals, that we're not main character energy, as they might say on TikTok these days, right? That we're actually part of a living, breathing ecosystem. And what I loved in that particular experience of connecting with the guys who ran this beautiful contemporary pilgrimage organization is that they really found all sorts of ways for us to connect with the natural landscape. So not just noticing the plants, noticing animals that we saw, but also like smelling things, even eating them, right? I remember Will made this like little tea by picking some of the leaves that he knew were edible and would make for a good tea and putting them in his boiling water. And so we could really like literally drink the natural world around us. And it was all sorts of embodied ways of connecting with the land. And again, one of the things I loved about that experience was we landed after walking for a couple of hours. We arrived at this beautiful old church, and this is just outside of Oxford in the UK. But before we went into the church, he took us to this beautiful old tree, this yew tree that was right next to the church. And he said maybe the reason why the church was built there in the first place was to be next to this tree. And we walked around this tree, we circumnavigated it 3 times, and it was this moment of arriving in the place. Like, you know how people say when you fly, your soul is still stuck where it was 7 hours ago because we're traveling too fast for our souls to catch up.
This is not natural, right?
This is not natural, right? There are moments where you're like, how are we doing this? But it was a way that walking around the tree a couple times, although it felt silly, it felt really helpful to just get present, get connected into the place that we were. So one of the things I think people respond to when they're thinking about nature rituals is that it's kind of like this cosmic outbreath. It's just like, oh, this is who I am. This is where I belong. This is how life is. Not necessarily how it's always supposed to be, but like this is life. Nature is full of death and destruction as much as it is beauty and gorgeousness. But there's a kind of sense of everything's okay when we're out in the natural world. And I think that's what people are responding to.
And the fact that this all existed before us and, God willing, will exist after us.
Yeah, exactly. It takes the lens of focus away from our individual sufferings and joys and just zooms out, right? And so there's so many beautiful religious practices about really focusing your mind, right, on a grain of sand or looking up at the night sky and remembering the bigness of everything that is. And so it right-sizes us, I think. It puts us into perspective.
Here are some of our guests' nature rituals, starting with Crowe. He joined Audacious to talk about his nearly 20-year relationship as the husband to an endangered white-naped crane named Walnut.
Something I try and do every day for at least 5 minutes or so is just sit somewhere out in nature. Often it's just my back porch and just listen to the birds singing, to the leaves rustling, the wind blowing. I find it very calming, very peaceful, and very grounding. The more I do it, the more I have that fresh air and just the sounds of nature, the better my mood is, the better I feel, and the less stressed I am. It may only be 5-10 minutes a day, but try and do that as often as possible, just to clear my head and gain some perspective and just be present and just absorb what's around and just relax.
I will walk barefoot in the woods, or even if I don't go into the woods, I'll like stand in my yard and just be outside in the morning. It's very meditative for me to do a lot of my deepest breathing there. And it allows me to step into my day on a level mind frame.
In Catalonia, it's typical to celebrate St. John with like summer solstice. Apart from fireworks, we do big fire to burn out all the things that we don't need. You put it on a paper, the things that you don't want, and then put in some holy water that you make the things that you want. So every summer solstice, we do this, but actually it's beautiful because you do it as everyone does it. And we do big fires on the street, and sometimes people start running around the fire.
Every day I meditate, imagining myself as some growing thing, usually a tree, sometimes a mountain, but that's a little harder for me to connect to. And sometimes a type of flower like sunflower comes up a lot. But I imagine that, and I imagine my spine being like whatever the usually the trunk or and all the roots going all the way down to the core of the earth and then coming back up into me so that I have the energy of the earth with me, and also feeling the sun on me and all of those things. Even if I'm depressed and in my bed and not going to move all day, I do that. And I also check in with my ancestors. Am I doing okay? Like, what do you want me to know? It's usually like, that guy's terrible, please leave him alone. But a lot of times it's just, remember you're loved. Remember that you don't have to do anything to deserve that love. Being alive is enough to deserve, enough to deserve all good things. There's a lot of that they seem to be wanting me to know.
That was Azie Dungey. You also heard the voices of Moon Ribas, Bruce W. Brackett, and Chris Crowe. When we get back, Casper shares how rituals can connect us to our lineage.
It's so silly, but I can feel my dad and his dad doing these silly games as I'm doing it now for a 5-year-old.
And hear more rituals from Audacious guests, including Stephanie Courtney, a.k.a. Flo from Progressive, on the one she did before heading on stage to do improv.
I just kiss my hand and I slap the sign. And then I lick the sign at intermission. I didn't finish my ritual.
I'm Kyone Wolf. This is Audacious. Stay with me. This is Audacious. I'm Kyone Wolf. When you think about rituals, maybe you think about witches around a cauldron, or maybe ones that happen in places of worship. Or maybe you picture an entirely different culture making a rite of passage with song and dance. Or maybe you think about your dog. I do. Every morning and every night when it's time to eat, it's also time to affirm his greatness. Here's what happens. He sits next to his bowl of food. I take his beautiful face in my hands and I talk to him, frankly, in a way that I believe God is talking to all of us. We just maybe don't hear it. I say, "You're a good puppy, and everybody loves you. And you're a good puppy. A good puppy." He shakes my hand in agreement. I ring the dinner bell, and everything is right with the world. Since dogs are obviously part of our family, let's talk about familial rituals with our guide for this hour, Casper Khalal. He's the author of The Power of Ritual, turning everyday activities into soulful practices.
Well, I think one of the things that's powerful about family practices is it's often not just happening in this moment with this brother and sister or this parent or whoever it is, but there's a sense of lineage, a sense of, especially think about food, right? Recipes that are passed down, or maybe songs that are sung, or in my family, it's a lot of silly games that we play that I know that my grandparents and my great-grandparents played. And now, one of my great joys is for the kids in my life, friends who have young ones, passing down these silly games, like a little rhyme with, like a little rhyme that I do by turning a napkin into a little man. And then he says this little rhyme in Dutch. It's so silly, but I can feel my dad and his dad doing these silly games as I'm doing it now for a 5-year-old. And so I think one of the things that happens with family rituals is it gives us a sense of belonging, not just to these people in this moment, but across time, to a lineage. And that helps us feel at home in the world.
All right, here are some family rituals from Audacious guests, starting with a man known as Pony Tromper, from our show about people who love and embody the spirit of horses.
So a ritual I have is with my spouse. Every night before bed, I take a moment to express intentional gratitude for her that reflects something from that day. This is something that started early in our relationship when we were dating. And it is something that helps her to hear, and it lets me feel strong in a way that brings me closer to my ideal self, that I can provide her this thing she needs, that I can give her this meaningful, honest, true affirmation.
I live far away from my family, and before bed every night, I'm not a very religious person, but I do sort of send all my good energy to all my people. And yeah, when I get on a plane, this is actually very interesting. I'm like, maybe I should talk about this in therapy. I have a lot of like rings and I wear a lot of different kinds of like jewelry. And for some reason, when I'm on a plane, I'll kind of touch them and think about who gave them to me, where they are, what they're up to. So I have a lot of rituals that I try to sort of energetically connect myself to the people that aren't physically with me.
Ryan and we do not sit down to a meal without saying our form of grace. And it can't just be, I'm grateful for this meal. It has to be something you've really thought about, that you were really grateful for, that happened to you that day, or that you made happen that day, or someone did for you that day, something you're really grateful for that day.
I think the only ritual that I have is giving my kids a kiss each night when they're sleeping. They're only small for such a young time. You can only get away with giving them a kiss on the forehead for a certain amount of time. And telling them how much I love them every single day is probably the most important thing that I can do. Being a man and showing love, showing emotion is, I think, the strongest thing that anybody can ever do.
There's a Spanish radio program every weekend, every Saturday and Sunday morning. They always play Chicago by Sufjan Stevens at the same time. And ever since they were babies, my kids sort of associate this song with weekend mornings, with Saturday mornings. And we dance to it. We dance to Chicago by Sufjan Stevens when it's on the radio. And it's really lovely. Sometimes they'll still be in their beds and they jump out of bed because they kind of hear it from the kitchen, from a transistor radio, and they come and we have our little dance and stuff, or we interrupt whatever we're doing to dance to Chicago by Sufjan Stevens. And that's a lovely ritual that has to do with radio, because radio is great and should be funded and should always exist.
That was Begoña, Gómez, Urzaiz, Brad White, Paul Marcarelli, Mary Elizabeth Kelly, and Pony Tromper. One place you'll find a lot of rituals is before a sport, or a performance, or a religious service. So what does Casper think about the power of these pre-game practices?
This is an interesting question because it gets a little bit to the fine line of managing anxiety, where people might get to the point of needing to, I think about the tennis player, Rafael Nadal, who, had so many tics and he had to line up the water bottles this way and he always had to pull his side of his underpants in a particular way. Like it's hilarious when you look at it because the guy just had this whole sequence of little things he had to do to feel good before he started to serve, in a match. And so I don't think those are always rituals because there isn't a sort of intentionality around them, right? So I just want to be careful about not naming everything that we do repeatedly is not always a ritual. But I think I think about friends who work as chaplains in a hospital, for example, right before they walk into a room, they might just take a breath and say to themselves, let me be the most loving I can be to be with this person over the next 50 minutes, who knows? And so just having that kind of pre-game ritual, as it were, before you start something, I think is really beautiful. Now, of course, sports in so many ways are very religious, right? The kind of the lore, the outfits, the songs, the heroes, the villains, all of it. And so, yeah, in the world of sport, you see a lot of ritual activity. And in fact, some of my work was looking at how secular fitness communities like CrossFit, for example, were full of rituals, full of ways in which people were kind of making meaning, not just working out together, but really building a community through shared ritual.
Here are some pre-performance rituals from Dr. Gale Ridge, interviewer and author Mehdi Hasan, and you know her as Flo from Progressive commercials, Stephanie Courtney.
As a concert pianist, I would have a little personal ritual just to myself in front of the audience. Nobody would notice it. Basically, I would raise my hands very quietly to my chest and then drop them quietly onto my knee, letting the gravity drop my hands to my knee. And what that does is just drain all the tension. It washes out of you. And then you can cope with what you're just about to do.
I'm Muslim, so I pray. I do pray before I go on live television, especially when I started doing my show in the pandemic in a basement. I was always praying that this won't all suddenly just go dark while I'm live on air. So there's a prayer for no technical glitches, but also just a general, I talk about in the book, like breathing exercises, which I interpret in my own Muslim way as prayers. So I do kind of take a deep breath. I do kind of take a step back before I start anything. And that's just from my upbringing. In terms of kind of non-serious, non-religious stuff, I try not to eat before I do stuff, because I find that can be a nightmare in many ways, physically and mentally. So I often eat after a debate, an interview, a TV show, a speech.
There's a sign at the Groundlings right before you go up on stage to perform. It says, the opportunity is here. And I just kiss my hand and I slap the sign. And then I go up and I do the show. And I'm like elbowing past my castmates. I'm like, excuse me. And then I go and I usually look out and I turn back to the cast and say, it's a hungry audience. It's a young audience. They're ready. They want to laugh. That's sort of what I do before I go out and be crazy for an hour and a half. But yeah, that's sort of a ritual. And I feel like just because the Groundlings has, my God, you think about the people that have been there, and you got Phil Hartman and Paul Rubens, rest in peace. And you've got these Jennifer Coolidge. You just got these people and you feel it. You feel that they were here too, And so I just kind of do that to remember that the opportunity is now. It's here. Just pay attention.
It's also better that you kissed your hand and then touched the sign instead of touching the sign and then kissing your hand. Just hygienically speaking.
Yeah, but at intermission, I licked the sign at intermission. I didn't finish my ritual. And I am sick all the time. I have rickets.
With all these rituals being created by us on our own terms and in our own space, I wanted to know what Casper thought about the difference between these individual rituals and the ones often shared by religions and communities.
I think sometimes maybe the challenge with rituals that sit in a secular space, right, where they don't have that kind of religious or spiritual element, is what's missing is a sense of a bigger story. And so if you think about the central ritual of Christian life, right? The Eucharist or the Mass. It's literally a retelling of Jesus's death and resurrection. And you're eating bread and you're drinking wine, right? Those are core elements of the story. And so this ritual has a message embedded in the narrative. Or think about the Passover Seder, right? It's the Exodus story that's told. So in all these different religious traditions, you see different stories being told through ritual. And again, those stories are not just something to entertain us. They're trying to teach us about how to live, how to treat each other, what's important. And so I think that's often what's really additive in a religious context, is there is a sense of a kind of moral direction to the rituals that, sometimes make them difficult too, but also valuable, I think, for a community trying to live together.
Here are some Audacious guests with their more spiritually centered rituals, starting with Rosanna Ramos.
At sunset, I pray to Lord Shiva. I chant the mantra for about 45 minutes. That's my me time. Yeah, and I try to get in contact with that deity, which is part of me. It gives me a lot of power in myself. I feel like I could face obstacles better, and also helps me to not react angrily to stimuli. So I kind of take a step back and be like, okay, this person is probably in pain. Let me just be kind. Kind is the default for me, but it's really cool.
Every morning I wake up and I just say, thank you, God, for the good and the bad. Sometimes just expect the good, but the bad can be good too. The bad is what grows us, what develops us, what pushes us, what challenges us. So I never back down from the bad, from the trials, the tribulations. That's how you become who you are. And I really believe everything comes from God. And even if it's bad, it's still okay. So thank you, God, for the good and the bad. I'm good.
Since I'm Japanese Buddhist, when I get up in the morning, I'll chant. And that kind of sets the day for me. I'll say, okay, what kind of good can I do today? And then in the evening, I go recount if I did any good or not. So, and so it's kind of like a check-in. It's a check-in at the end of the day. Okay, did you do good? Well, I got angry at this person and I could have done better or something like that. So, and I try to do that at 7:00 in the evening every day. Now, I don't do it every day because I'll be out in a meeting or something like that. In Japantown, but what I'll do is I'll even interrupt whatever I'm doing, whether I'm editing a video or I'm doing something at 7:00. I'll stop what I'm doing, go in front of my altar, chant, and then go and take care of business.
I just get up in the morning and say, good morning, God. Good morning, Jesus. Tell me what to say and tell me what to do. I trust you and I believe in you. Jesus never fails. I may say it 50 times, then I go to sleep. Amen.
So in India, when a baby is born, they usually put a little black dot. You add that little imperfection so the world knows you're not perfect. And I used to do it for the longest time for my kids here. When they were little, they didn't fight it at all because they didn't know. And a couple of times my family Christmas cards, holiday cards went out with a big black dot on my kid's head. And I remember my pediatrician calling me and saying, I don't remember seeing a mole on this kid. Like, when did they get a mole this big? Like, we need to, like, she was panicked. So I had to explain to her what it was. And now, of course, they're much older. So they don't like a big black dot on their head. But whenever they're going to do something important, I make the same dot behind their ear. It's my way of saying, you're not perfect. It's all going to be okay. God is watching out for you.
I love that. It also reminds me of the idea rug makers would intentionally drop a stitch because only God could make something perfect.
Exactly. It's the same logic. You know, they say even the moon is imperfect. In Hindi, there are many sayings about this, the imperfections of the moon. So no matter how perfect you believe you are, your kids are, your family is, you know, we're all a little human, and that's okay.
Those comedians Zarna Garg, Ronnie Woo Woo Wickers, Greg Viloria, Sonya Horton, and Rosanna Ramos. After the break, singer-songwriter Jada Starr shares her rituals and a few of her aunt Dolly Parton. Then ritual expert Casper Khalal helps you create your own.
Notice what you love and start there. And then what I would do is think about those three things of intention, attention, and repetition.
I'm Kyone Wolf. This is Audacious. Stay tuned. This is Audacious. I'm Kyone Wolf. Today we're exploring rituals. Not the big ceremonial kind, but the quiet, personal ones that keep us grounded. Now let's hear from someone who had a front row seat to country music royalty, singer-songwriter Jada Starr, who just so happens to be Dolly Parton's niece. Here's what Jada had to say about the rituals she's created in her own life.
When I'm going out to do a bunch of stuff for the day and I get in the car, my husband, he's actually in the room with me and he'll agree, my kid and my husband, they know that if I need to get pumped up, my ritual is I have to listen to the song Best Life by Cheekface. I also have kind of a little thing in the morning when my husband and my kid and I leave the house. I have a little spray bottle of Florida water, which just smells so nice. And so I'll kind of spray that on each of us before we leave the house. We all pet our little good luck cat that we have on the counter, my husband, my kid, and I, and then we all go out the door. So that's another ritual we do. I think anything could be a ritual. That's my little dumb rituals.
Jada was kind enough to give us a behind-the-scenes look at a few of the personal rituals her Aunt Dolly relies on to stay grounded and inspired.
She does meditate and pray every single day. She has a little spot in everywhere that she's staying that has her little thing with her little cross and a little holy water, stuff that makes her feel good right there. Yeah, rituals are nice. I think they are. I watch King of the Hill before bed. Does that count as a ritual?
It does now.
Yeah.
A family tree becomes an orchard calling for us to sing their song. Their memory goes on.
Here are just a few more rituals from people who've been guests on Audacious over the past 2 years.
I love to meditate somatically, so like to feel the unseen helpers in my life. Like, who was in the factory that made this microphone? Who was it that decided to paint these pencils yellow? Like, you know, who put the nail on this wall 80 years ago? You know, people I don't see that have contributed to my life. I like to feel what they might have felt like, and I like to feel how my body experiences their gift in the world that I get to use and thrive off of. It's such a privilege to be born in this time There's so much support. It's like so much support. I can press a button and get everything I need. There's so many unseen hands that bring those things. So I really like to sit with them in my heart and see where that takes me.
For many years, and even still, I was a professional photographer. And the reason I feel like I became a photographer is because I see things. And I know that sounds weird and creepy, but I feel like there are things that we see that are undescribable. And for a long time, I stopped taking pictures because I would see these colors and I couldn't capture them the way I wanted to capture them. And now I try and see colors in people and I try and see that shine. Like, even if it is the most horrific of situations, I do look for the shine in that situation, that gold. So my ritual is once a day, I look for the shine in something. Wherever I am, I look to see what catches my eye. And I giggle. And even when I'm sad and crying, it's the first thing I think is, with tears in my eyes, what can you see through the tears?
I like to breathe, and I use my flute as the catalyst for that. And I try in the morning to hear some prayers or Jewish songs, and I play them and I hear them through my head. So that's something I try to do, and happy to have people hear it or not hear it. And it's just soothing to me.
Is there something you can play for me now?
Sure. That helps me start the day.
Okay, this might sound a little strange, but I vibrate my chakras one by one. And I'll do that, starting the bottom, go up and down and up and down. And that just calms me down so much. That's great.
That was David Roach, Mindy Glickman, Rosemary Wallace, and Luis Mojica. Now let's get back to my conversation with Casper to Kyle, author of The Power of Ritual, turning everyday activities into soulful practices. There's another ritual I do that I didn't mention, which was before I interview somebody, there's a candle right off screen. You can't see it, but I light it. And so but before we connected, I lit it and said, Casper, shine. And I wait until after we're done with our conversation, I will snuff it out and say, Casper, thank you. And I do that for everybody I interview because I want to reaffirm that you exist for me before this interview and you exist for me after it. This is not transactional to me. This means a lot. And so to honor everybody that way is really special to me. But then I hear myself talking and I feel a little self-conscious and I'm like, I've got my morning ritual going. Yay, I've got my candle ritual. I've got a certain ritual where I wash my hands and I imagine yesterday going down the drain.
I love it.
I've got a ritual with my dog where I repeat a certain affirmation to him that's very
beautiful,
important. And I'm thinking, I'm like, is there such thing as having too many rituals?
Listen, what you just described sounds gorgeous to me. So I don't think you're at saturation point yet. I mean, ultimately, like if it's getting in the way of, actually being there in the conversation when you're interviewing someone or taking your dog for a walk.
Right. If I light the house on fire, then we've got a problem here.
Or you've got, a series of 800 to do before you could talk to someone, then we're probably in a different place. But I also think that we want to be careful of not putting ritual on a pedestal where it feels like they can't be changed and, they have to be preserved in exactly the way that we've always done them. And I found Thomas Merton's work really helpful here because he talked about the difference between tradition and convention. And convention is kind of doing something the way it has always been done. And I'm sure we've all heard that person say it. No, that's the way we do it because it's always how it's been done. And so that's really interested in the outer form, right? The way in which we do it. And he says tradition is the kind of burning heart of the reason why we do it in the first place. And so what he's saying in the context of Catholicism, he's writing that there is going to be some change in how we do things, but what matters is really knowing why we're doing them in the first place. So maybe one day there'll be a different affirmation you need to give to your dog, or there'll be another animal in your life who gets a different affirmation. Or it might be, that something changes, and that's okay. I want to join you in all of these. They sound great.
Come on over. The final thing I needed to know from Casper was, how can we create our own rituals or add to the ones we've already made?
2 things to start a ritual. The first is to start with what you love. What are the moments where you already feel the possibility for ritual, right? It might be listening to a really favorite song that you love to sing along to, or it might be just a moment in your day where you have a little pause and you could light the candle, or a walk that you take in the neighborhood where you're like, I always love this bush, or something. So notice what you love and start there. And then what I would do is think about those 3 things of intention, attention, and repetition. What's the intention that you want to bring to the ritual? What's a way to pay attention? And you can use the 5 senses here. So maybe, is there something you want to lean into smelling or tasting or seeing or hearing, touching? Just think about all the ways, whether it's stained glass or incense or blessing by putting a hand on your head, or right. There's so many different ways we know just in our bodies how to do this. So intention, paying attention while you're doing it, using the 5 senses, and then repetition over time. So even if the first time you're like, don't know if that was the one for me, give it a couple more goes. Just see how it feels. And just like kind of slipping into a warm bath, you'll figure out what feels right for you.
All right, before we go, I've got one more very special clip for you. My big brother, Paul Gladys, created this bedtime ritual with his kids, Arwen, Aiden, and Willow. You'll hear them do it after he explains how it came to be.
When our kids were old enough to talk, my wife and I wanted to start a nightly prayer with them, but none of the ones from our childhood felt quite right. And then one day I remembered my days as a Boy Scout when we used to recite the Scout Law. It goes, a Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. And it got me thinking, maybe we can use that structure for the prayer that we say every night. It starts off with, may I be, as kind of referring to a daily intention. And it ends with, and may tomorrow be a better day. As a reminder that we are not perfect, nor are we intended to be perfect, but hopefully tomorrow we can do things just a little bit better.
1, 2, 3. May I be healthy, happy, strong, safe, brave, thoughtful, thankful, respectful, responsible, obedient, kind, compassionate, considerate, generous, helpful, patient, friendly, trustworthy, and loving to others and myself, and may tomorrow be a better day.
Audacious is always lovingly produced by Jessica Severin D. Martinez, Meg Fitzgerald, and Robin Doyon-Aitken at Connecticut Public Radio in Hartford. If you like episodes like this where we feature a bunch of people's responses to one question, we did one about forgiveness, life advice, beloved kitchen utensils, things people feel salty about, tattoo cover-ups, and awe. And we've got another one we're working on right now about courage. Find them at ctpublic.org/audacious or wherever you get your podcasts. And if listening to Audacious is your weekly ritual, consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. You can see a video of the mealtime affirmations I do with my extraordinarily handsome dog, Gray, on the socials at Kyone Wolf. And I would love to hear about your rituals. Send an email to audacious@ctpublic.org. Peace.